I wasn't sure I was going to like this book. There is a lot of emotions through this book. I was shocked. I was surprised in how this ended. Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to go ahead and do a book review. I've decided, as I said in my last wrap up, that I wanted to do my reviews a little bit differently here. Sometimes it becomes very overwhelming to film wrap-ups because I have to make sure that I'm covering all this information with all these books and giving you guys a good idea. And those videos can take a really long time to film and a really long time to edit. And so I thought it would be interesting if I just tried to split it up a little bit. I was going to try to do some weekly wrap-ups, but what I think I'm going to do, and was actually my husband's idea, was just doing single reviews for certain books. It will most likely be books that I really loved, or newer books, or books that are coming out that haven't yet, so that you can get an idea before you go buy them if this is one that you want to invest in. So today's book review that I'm going to go over is Promise Me Sunshine by Cara Bastone. I will still talk about these briefly in the wrap-ups, the books that I do film a video for, but I will definitely be shortening the length of that considerably and just, linking below the videos that pertained to that wrap-up of books that I didn't talk about as much. So this book, let's go ahead and just get started with it. I started this book and I was just not sure about how I felt about this book. This is my first book by Cara Bastone, and I knew that I was going to really be excited for it because I have heard so many great things about Ready or Not, which I still have not read. And so this really made me super excited to just jump into this book right away. Well, it does say on the book that this is following her journey where she loses her best friend. And her best friend had cancer. And so you already know right off the bat, there's going to be grief triggers. There's going to be cancer triggers. But I had no idea just how much this book was going to really delve into grief. And so first off, right off the bat, I want to put a huge disclaimer here that if you have struggled with losing someone recently or are still struggling in your grief journey, I do not recommend reading this book. It is so raw that I do think that I would caution you to stay away from it if you do not feel that it is something that you can handle right now, because it is very raw and, quite frankly, depressing for a good chunk of the book. And so I really was struggling with, do I like this book or not? So it is following Lenny, and she loses her best friend, Lou. And in the process of that grief, she is still kind of trying to work jobs here and there as a nanny. So she takes a short-time job. And in doing that, she meets Ainsley, and she is the little girl that she watches. And then her uncle, Miles, kind of hangs around. And he's kind of just this grumpy guy who seems to not have great social skills and is always kind of just lurking around while she babysits, kind of keeping an eye on her, and sort of just seems like he's very judgmental. So later in the book, you see all of the huge struggles that she goes through throughout grief and how hard this is really hitting her. I'm going to keep this spoiler free, so I will have to be vague to an extent. So Miles, in turn, ends up really recognizing this in her because he also has dealt with grief and decides that he wants to help her get through this. So this entire book is following her grief journey and her healing journey, and Miles alongside her is helping her walk through that however he can help her. And so it really digs deep and it really gets in the grit of the struggles that people who have just lost someone can be going through. There are moments where she doesn't want to eat. There are moments where she just doesn't want to sleep or can't sleep. And so, there are plenty of moments where she's just crying, and there is a lot of emotions through this book. I have been lucky enough to have not lost someone close to me, so I was able to get through it, but I can only imagine what this would be like for someone who has experienced that, and especially someone who has experienced that recently. So I wasn't sure I was going to like this book because it was just so heavy, but I got to the end, and the second half of the book, it really just, you start to see the growth and you start to really see the story coming together and their relationship coming together. And it was so beautifully written. I really can't describe to you the feelings that I felt when the story was wrapping up, except to just say that I was shocked. I was surprised in how this ended. I really didn't expect my feelings that I had towards the end. The relationship I felt was so wholesome and real. And I feel like a lot of books that we read, relationships are very, just not a great representation of real life. And this I felt like was such a great representation of a real life relationship, the real struggles and the real stuff you can go through and the real pacing of a true healthy relationship. And I truly felt that this was done so well. It was so realistic. And I think that's why it was so hard-hitting. By the time I got to the end, I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is 5 stars. Am I going to 5-star this book that I've been complaining about this whole time? Am I? I'm not sure. By the end, I knew it was 5 stars. And I was in awe of the journey that Cara took us on through grief, and it made me feel I could recognize in my friend who recently lost someone, almost like it gave me a glimpse of the journey that she went through. I felt like this book was so accurately done in such a raw way that I feel like I understand her better. And that's just a testament to how well she wrote it. Do I think this is going to depict everyone's grief journey? No, I do not, because everyone grieves differently, but I do think that it is probably a pretty accurate one. And the beautiful love story that came out of it is just, one of the top romance books that I have read. And so it went from a book that I was complaining and unsure about to now one of my top romances I am positive of the year. So now recently when someone asked me to give them my top 3 romance books of all time, this one was listed in that top 3, which is a huge deal. It is a huge deal. For me to just change my mind so completely over a book, hats off. Hats off to the author, because that is a huge feat. So I obviously highly recommend this book. I give a huge 5-star glowing report of it. And I highly recommend you pick this one up with caution when it comes out, which I believe is at the end of this next month. It's either April or March. I will place the date right here. But if that is something that you're interested in, definitely go check it out. If you have read this arc, please give me your comments below and what you thought about it. If you have read other things by Cara Bastone, I would love to hear your thoughts on her books. And until next time, friends, remember to read what inspires you. Bye.